Welcome back to Reciprocity Radio. You're here with Cassie and my co host Maya. We are on our next episode of the series of our ABCs. And today we are talking about decarbonization. If sustainability is the vision of a world where people and planet can flourish and thrive together, then decarbonization is the way that we get there. So stay tuned, and we've got some juicy tidbits for you guys to chew on today. D is for decarbonization.
Decarbonization, it's a fancy word, simple idea though. Basically just means stop putting so much carbon into the air. For the last 2 centuries, since we've been running on fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas have just been part of our everyday life. And every time we burn them, we release carbon that has been locked underground for millions of years. And that carbon builds up into the atmosphere, traps heat, and then warms the planet. Decarbonization is the process of unhooking our economy from that cycle. So it touches everything, right? It's like how we generate our electricity, how we move people and goods, how we make steel and concrete, how we grow our food. And as you can see, it's not just one light switch, right? It's thousands of switches across every sector all at once. Okay, I'm gonna ask for a little imagination here. I need you to picture something. Picture a bathtub. The water in the tub is all the carbon in the atmosphere. The faucet, that's where the carbon comes from. Burning fossil fuels, cutting down forests, and the drain represents where the carbon goes. Oh, the oceans absorb some, plants and soil absorb some, and right now, the faucet is gushing way faster than the drain can handle. The tub is filling up. And as the water rises, the planet is getting hotter. And that is the carbon bathtub analogy. But here's the tricky part. There are feedback loops that we don't fully understand. As the Arctic melts, it releases more carbon that was trapped in permafrost. So the tub starts filling itself even faster. It's like, how do we turn off this faucet and how do we make the drain even wider so that the tub doesn't overflow before it's too late? Before we go even further, I just want to also clarify a couple of terms that you might just be hearing out in the wild and you're like, wait, I don't even know what this exactly means. What's the difference between this and that? But all of these refer to decarbonization. Right now we have carbon neutral. Carbon neutral is when you balance out the carbon you emit with an equal amount of carbon removal. Like when you fly somewhere and they ask you to pay a little extra to plant trees that absorb the same amount of carbon that you emitted as you were flying to your destination. We also have net zero. It's the same idea, just on a bigger scale. And across an entire company or country, every ton of CO2 emitted is balanced by a ton removed. And there's like no cheating involved there. And then we have climate neutral. And like carbon neutral, but you also account for other greenhouse gases like methane. I almost think of climate neutral as carbon neutral's cousin. They're basically in the same family. Climate positive is that you go beyond net zero and you actually remove more carbon than you emit. You're kind of giving the planet a little extra credit, a little extra wiggle room for excess carbon. And then there's net negative, and again, that's the same as climate positive. It's just a different way of saying it.
You may or may not know that the energy sector is one of the largest sources of global CO2 emissions, accounting for about 40% of our total emissions all over the planet. And so, cleaning up how we produce power has truly some of the most significant and direct impacts on decarbonization. And this transition isn't just like a future goal that we're looking and hoping to achieve, it's actively happening in your communities, in your state, in our country, and all over the world. And we can take some helpful hints from other countries as well as to what we can implement here in our home. I believe last year in 2025, the first half, we as a global planetary figure had solar power surging, overtaking coal as the world's leading force of electricity for the first time in history, I believe. And that's such a win for renewable energy. It gives us that guiding light that it is possible, that there are many technologies contributing to our success. And two that we can highlight right now are solar power and battery storage. For solar, it's as you know, things are getting hotter. The sun is something we have access to all over the world, and we can really hone in that source of energy. It is the primary engine of renewable growth right now and provides lots of opportunities and innovation and job opportunities. And so it's something that we should really be leaning into if we haven't already. And the next would be the battery storage, and battery energy storage systems are actually scaling up pretty fast right now. They're essential for storing the energy from intermittent sources like wind and solar, and they can be built much more quickly than traditional power plants, as well as it becomes something tangible for almost everyone, where you can buy batteries to store energy and use them at other times. And so it becomes a more accessible way of tapping into decarbonization. Nature-based solutions really are the unsung heroes for our climate fight. They use the natural power of forests, wetlands, and even soil to capture and store these massive amounts of carbon dioxide that are in our environments. It's a vital complement to the shift to clean energy, as well as becomes a tangible way to see how protecting and restoring our planet heals not only the planet, but also us. And so we can see this in practice by tuning into forestation and forest health, planting new forests on previously forest land, or avoiding deforestation in general. I know in California, the Nature Conservancy is working to restore forest health through thinning and beneficial fires to prevent massive emissions from wildfires. That's a huge one that is really prevalent in the United States, especially on the West. Wildfires are everywhere. They're all consuming, and it's not just that they destroy our forests or they destroy entire communities, take lives, and take up resources like our precious waters, but then it's catastrophic to, the quality of air conditions around us during it and after. So something to look into that's really powerful is wildfires and their direct impact on our communities in the United States. And if you haven't tuned into it, I definitely recommend it because our fire cycle has expedited about a month or a month and a half. What should be going on in August right now is going on in June. It's important for all of us. Because what happens in Canada or on the West, you can feel all the way in New York. But another way that we can tap into this practice of decarbonization is through wetland and coastal restoration. We can restore wetlands, convert agricultural land to native wetlands, and they become incredible carbon sinks, so much more powerful than anything that we can really build at this time because these ecosystems have been doing it for eons. And so the work in California, for instance, aims to reduce emissions and improve habitat on a large scale. And this restoration of wetlands and coastal areas is massive in achieving that goal. And lastly, I'll talk about soil management. Especially through agriculture, using practices like no-till farming or planting cover crops such as clover and the like, oats even, they can turn agricultural lands into carbon absorbing sponges. This captures carbon in the soil and improves health and water retention at massive rates. It's really incredible to see and how quickly these ecosystems end up revitalizing themselves. So, the story of nature based solutions is really one of profound promise and obvious caution as well. The scientific community raises red flags about how these projects are often implemented and then, particularly specific to the carbon offset market. But if a project pays to protect a forest that wasn't going to be cut down anyway, it hasn't really removed any new carbon from the atmosphere. So, there are problems with just moving deforestation to another area or a forest storing carbon for decades, releasing it all in a single wildfire. It's always both, Maya and I like to say. We see both sides of everything, and that's especially true in sustainability and specifically in decarbonization. The good news is that these challenges are being recognized. There is a growing effort for more rigorous science and policy to ensure that these projects deliver real, measurable, and lasting climate benefits. It has to meet all of those aspects because otherwise it's just not sustainable. It's helpful to think of decarbonization as it pertains to sustainability in three pillars, let's say. One is clean energy, the way we power everything, whether it's with water, sun, wind. You can think of this as instead of gasoline cars, we could have electric vehicles charged by renewable energy. The second pillar would be efficiency and circularity. Easy with this one. We were just talking about it in our last episode. If you use less, you waste less. Pretty easy there. As well as the final nature based solutions. Let the earth do what it does best. Learn from it, adapt its rhythms. Nature is always going to be our original sustainability technologies.
That brings in this idea of just technical solutions as well. The scientists and in academia, it feels like we're always talking about what our governments and our businesses could be doing. And I want to point to one, I guess, quote unquote framework, which is the stabilization wedges concept. And this was created back in 2004 by two Princeton researchers named Pakala and Sokolow. Sorry if I said that wrong. They basically said, like, we don't need one miracle technology. We need a bunch of existing tools that we already have, each doing a manageable amount to decarbonize our climate. So imagine a triangle. Each slice is a quote unquote wedge, and it represents avoiding 1 billion tons of carbon per year. And one wedge might be, like Cassie was saying, put solar panels on rooftops everywhere. Another might be, just like Cassie was saying, make cars electric and or make them twice as fuel efficient. So their math said pick 7 wedges and we will just stabilize the problem. So they want to keep each of these wedges of 1 billion tons of carbon. They want to keep it like in that frame. So it's not necessarily totally decarbonizing the environment or the planet, but it is just more so stabilizing it. To be fair, that was in 2004, right? So at the time, the atmospheric CO2 was 378 parts per million, and today we're well over 420. We're not really talking about stabilization anymore. We're talking about net zero or even net negative. And so in this, we kind of need a 2.0, even 3.0 version, and we need even more wedges. Maybe 12 instead of 7, probably like 15 if we're being honest. But the core idea still holds with this concept, which is like, we don't need this silver bullet that will just solve it all. We need a silver buckshot, lots of solutions at once. This framework has been criticized, and I do think it's important to be honest about that, right? It treats each wedge as independent when in reality they all interact. So if you electrify your vehicles, but your grid is still coal powered, you haven't really solved the problem, right? It also assumes political and economic conditions that don't always exist everywhere. It was designed from a global north perspective, and we'll get more into that a little later in the pod of the justice perspective of it. But critics point out that it focuses it on technological fixes rather than these deeper questions about consumption, inequality, and justice. So, yes, these budgets are useful, but they're not necessarily a roadmap. They're more so a starting point for us to be like, okay, in this sector, this is where we need to stabilize and then work towards decarb. So, what does decarbonization actually look like right now in this world of 2026? I have a couple of examples for you guys. The first one that comes to mind is the direct air capture. A company called ClimateWorks built giant fans in Iceland that literally suck CO2 out of the air, which is so cool. They filter it, they mix it with water, and they pump it deep underground where it turns into stone. And their plant called Mammoth is the biggest in the world. It's still small and we need a lot more, but the proof is that the technology works. And I think that's really important to point out that, like, yes, innovation can help us reach our goals, but it's not going to be the end all be all. We need policy set in place. Another one that comes to mind is green steel. Steel production accounts for about 7 to 9% of the global CO2 emissions. But in Sweden, they have a project called Hybrid. It's making fossil-free steel. So instead of using coal to melt the iron ore, they use hydrogen made from renewable energy. And the only byproduct of that is water vapor. So Volvo is already using this steel in some vehicles, which is cool to think about and cool to nod to. When the full-scale plant comes online, it could actually reduce Sweden's total emissions by 7%, which is 7% sounds small, but I promise you it's huge. It's a great thing. Third, carbon capture on industrial plants. This is still being worked at. Again, it kind of shows that, like, technological advancements do help us, but if they're not totally there, then it's like, what are they really doing? Will technology save us from climate change? And the answer is kind of, because it's a mix of things, right? It also has to be paired with policy and collective action. But anyways, carbon capture is kind of newer idea and technology that is trying to be refined. And so facilities around the world are trying to capture CO2 right at the smokestack and, right at the little chimney that emits all of the carbon into the air of these industrial plants before it actually reaches the atmosphere. And they want to either store it underground or use it to make concrete. Again, these are working ideas. We don't even know the full impact of these technological advancements yet, but it is cool to think that we are thinking of this. And then also just electrifying everything. We can electrify our ships, our trucks, even airplanes are starting to go electric or to run on hydrogen, you know, or making container ships run on green methanol.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say to like the common person, what does that really look like, right? Sometimes these goals just seem so large, but it's like I have to make rent next month. So am I gonna have to sacrifice the life I live already and put more of myself and energy out there? And the thing is, it's a investment for the future. Even if you don't want kids, like in 30 years, do you want a better future or do you just want the compilation of this already like really strained system to keep getting more strained and more messed up? That looks like to the common person, and I consider myself a common person, cleaner air. Cool. That means better health, right? That means more money in your pocket when there's other forms of energy being used. That's a cost saving upgrade to your life and not just your own, but to your whole community. There's more stable food prices because there's less droughts and floods and heat waves that are already driving up the cost of corn, coffee, and the likes. Decarbonization will stabilize our climate, which means harvests are more stable, which means your grocery bills are more stable. It all goes hand in hand. That looks like less extreme weather, less volatility, less rolling of the dice theory or loading of the dice theory, my apologies, where there's just so much volatility in our atmosphere and in our climate that it ends up looking like floods and wildfires for months at a time. Sometimes we're like, yes, but that's a too big of an issue for just little me to tackle. We have the daily actions you can also tap into to help minimize the contributions that we have to this monstrosity of an issue. But I just wanted to say, like, it matters, it touches our lives, even if you're not in climate policy, even if you're not living in a wildfire prone environment, you're going to feel it in one way or another.
By just actively participating in it, you are then like helping build a more resilient community, a more resilient society, a more resilient environment where we can all thrive for years on end. And it was like last year, solar was cheaper than natural gas. Was that correct? Or just like gas in general?
I think it was in 2025, yeah. Which
Yeah,
is insane because we are fed the different story,
a different
that
narrative. Yeah.
yeah, like the story needs to be flipped and changed first before our behaviors can. So hopefully we're contributing to flipping the script for you, giving you more autonomy over your actions and the impact that you have on this planet because you matter and what you do matters to the environment that you're in. I leave conversations around sustainability or any of my classes that I'm in. And I'm just like, what can I do right now that would contribute to this thing because now it matters to me? And that really does look similar to the circular economy. Like those actions can include walking, biking, taking public transit, eat your leftovers, don't throw things away, compost, air dry your clothes, unplug electronics when they're just sitting there. If there's a little light on your electronic, that means that it's phantom energy. That means that it's taking money out of your pocket to just have something plugged in for something that you're not even using. There are different ways to upgrade your life, like going solar and using induction cooktops or buying an EV. I personally would not necessarily go to an EV right away because I have my qualms on the way that they are built. Nothing is fully sustainable, but they are efforts in the right direction. And if you don't want to do one, say what is the equivalent that I could do with something that I care about. So, switching your light bulbs, buying secondhand, supporting circular brands. It touches on not only decarbonization, but on circular economy, on adaptation. We're hitting so many marks by doing one single action. One that I am now really feeling the pull towards is eating more plants and less meat. And it's really freaking hard. But even eating one meatless day or multiple days in your week, the amount that I've saved in my wallet, I kind of did it honestly because I'm like, oh, I'm so tight on funds. How do I get energy within me and protein without having to spend $30 on a flank steak, even though that's so yummy and I would make it last for meals? I'm diversifying my plate. Like, even if that's the only reason you decide to do these actions daily, do it. Like, whatever your reason, hey, if it's going to cut costs, do it. Put more money in your pocket. Be more self-sustained and self-sufficient at that point. And I love, Maya, that you were talking about community and like collective action because that is a huge way to tap into these big initiatives like joining meetings in your community, checking out the solar projects that your community might have already. If it doesn't have one, why not?
I'm in Los Angeles and I'm very proud to be living in Los Angeles. And just going off of looking into our backyard, LA is coal free. As of early as 2026, our Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the biggest public utility in the country, mind you, is officially powered by a coal-free energy supply. And that means they've shut down the last coal plant that they were connected to, which is an amazing win. So that was like the first thing that LA was doing. Second is the 100% clean energy goal. Our current Mayor Karen Bass, has pushed up LA's timeline, and I'm not here to endorse or not endorse politicians here. I'm just laying out what Karen Bass has done. She has pushed up LA's timeline for clean energy. The city is now aiming for 100% clean energy by 2035, which is just 9 years away. And they're investing in solar, wind, battery storage, and modernizing the grid, the energy grid, which is great because right now we need to modernize our tech if we want to bring in new technology that supports wind, solar, and battery storage. Third, and this is the coolest one, I think, in my opinion, the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program. Just last month, in May 2026, Southern California celebrated its first project under this program, which is so sick. It's called McKinney Manor, an affordable housing complex where they swapped out the old gas appliances for clean electric ones. So, heat pumps, induction stoves, like Cassie was saying, and all the works. And here's the key: 75% of the program's funding is reserved for underserved communities, which is really cool. So the people getting these upgrades aren't these wealthy homeowners in the hills, which is, I don't know, I think that's pretty awesome because at the same time, it's like these are like real Angelinos who are finally getting their due, right? They're low income families or renters who've been breathing this dirty air for decades, and the upgrades are free. They're no cost to the residents. So why wouldn't you? I feel like that's the coolest part of this program. And so California is spending nearly $500 million on this program, which is a lot of money. But to be fair, we are like the third or fourth largest economy in the entire world. So we have it, we have the funds, so why not use it? So I think like when people say decarbonization is this abstract thing and it's far away, it's not. It's literally happening in apartment buildings in South LA. It's happening at our utility companies, and it could be happening in your city too. That just brings us back to what Cassie and I both really are passionate about and want to talk about is justice, because decarbonization doesn't help everyone equally unless it's designed to do that.
This is truly the greatest opportunity of probably our lifetimes where we can mix innovation with creation and building and connecting a world that works for everyone, including the environment. Right. So I'm so stoked to share more about the justice aspect because it's really important to ask questions, right? Sometimes it's called a just transition. I think we've touched on that in previous podcasts. But basic questions to be asking here is in order to have a future that is fair, equitable, inclusive, where the people who have contributed the least to climate change are not the only ones who are bearing the heaviest burden, as we know in our red zone and redlined communities. But the questions that we can really pause and reflect on is who pays the cost of this life that we're living? Who reaps the reward? And then who gets a seat at the table? If we keep checking in on those things, there's no way not to come to decarbonization or any aspect of sustainability without the inclusive, just mindset that we really need to have in order for justice to take hold and to be the way that we operate from here on out.
And again, it's all about the design of these systems. My professor, Dr. Shannon Gibson, who runs this climate justice lab out of USC, actually introduced me to this framework called Progress Plus. And it helps us think about who's most vulnerable to climate change. It stands for place of residence, race, ethnicity, and culture are included in that. Occupation, gender, and sex, religion, education, socioeconomic status, social capital, and the plus covers things like ingenuity, disability, and displacement. And all of these factors affect whether you can bounce back from a climate disaster or whether you're going to still be struggling for years later. And the reason why I bring up climate disasters is because our world is getting hotter. due to all of this carbon in the air, which means that our climate disasters are becoming more and more prevalent. So again, they're all connected. So take Hurricane Melissa that just hit the Caribbean in 2025, I believe in late fall of 2025. These are countries that are still shaped by colonialism. Their economies run on tourism. So when a storm hits, people lose their jobs basically overnight. And even within those communities, there are these intersections of groups that are still more marginalized. So women, for example, often get hit the hardest when these natural disasters happen. Not only are they trying to rebuild their own life, but they're also having to think about taking care of their kids and taking care of elderly relatives. Not only that, there's proof that domestic violence increases or goes up after a natural disaster hits. And I think that when you look at the social data that comes out from these natural disasters, you begin to see that the people who contribute the least to climate change are the ones suffering the most from it.
If we don't add justice into the transition of our world into a more fruitful future, it really just deepens the same patterns that got us into this mess to begin with. It really is as simple as designing concrete actions, policies, commitments to center the human experience as valuable. There's so many dimensions of justice as well. There's the way that we make decisions, from where wind farms are placed to how pollution regulations are written. There's the way that justice is distributed, so distributive justice. The benefits of clean energy have to reach the communities that have been most polluted in our country. And there are ways to counter all of these things, right? To put them in action with procedural justice. There's creating communities that are involved in the planning process of the economic future of spaces. For distributive justice, there's solar programs in communities that allow renters and low income households to subscribe to solar energy without necessarily needing to install panels on their roofs because they can't afford it. There's historical harms that have to be acknowledged and repaired, like toxic dumping, forced displacements, the redlining and red zones that were created on the policy level that can definitely be rewritten. And so that's called restorative justice, where we are using investments, let's say federally, to implement environmental justice with grants to support grassroots movements and organizations that are on the front lines. The federal government themselves doesn't have to do anything, but they can provide the investment to help these organizations that really want to provide the healing and lead the charge for their own communities, as they should. There's democracy of energy, such as communities having ownership over their own energy systems. And not just passive consumers that get zero choice and have all of these options just dumped on them, and not even options, just one way of life just dumped on them, and that's the only thing they can choose. I actually have the perfect case study that just popped into my head for this just transition, right? Temple University wanted to expand in Northern Philadelphia, I believe, wanted to expand its initiatives for their environmental work. And so they wanted to go out into their inner city communities that were around them and say, like, here, we're going to teach you how to care about the environment. And, long story short, these people were like, that's so cool that you want us to care about the environment, but dog, like, we can't even eat. Like, our mom is working two, three jobs, and we're just kids, and like, we need a job before we can even start caring about the environment. Like, are you serious? And it stuck with me because Temple University, instead of being like, oh, well, that doesn't fit with our criteria or whatever we're trying to work and like force upon you, they said, thank you so much for letting us know that. So let's show you how to work in these energy sectors, how to start your own solar panel business and organization so that you guys can not only help the environment by the actions you're taking, but now you and your community and your economy are restored with opportunities, powerful tools that you can continue to share with generations from now. And so I thought that was the coolest thing that they actually listened and said, no, like we respect that so much. And it's not that you don't care about the environment, it's that you don't have a livelihood that aligns with also environmental value. And so when the two can flourish together, it is so powerful because it's not innately that people don't care about the environment. It's they don't really have the attention for it. They don't have the space for it. They don't have the means to act it out without possibly not getting paid. In the Silicon Valley, I believe, where they were just, green gentrification everywhere, clean energy infrastructure here, and composting sites there. And they were revitalizing the space, but then displaced long term residents that had been there for also centuries with their families. And then they could no longer afford the housing in that area because there was backlash. They were not included in the revitalization of that space with the new like green energy initiatives, the greenwashing that was taking place. And so they were forcibly pushed out. And instead, there could have been that gap of, hey, let's talk to the residents. Let's see what they need to be able to stay here and continue to enact these environmental actions within their everyday life. And so that's what we're talking about. Just another little story that brings it full circle where we do not want to perpetuate inequality. Decarbonization or any sustainability initiative or movement without justice is extractive at its core. Decarbonization is a beautiful way to show that this movement is really a collective action, not just in our community, but to the state, federal, national, global level. We are all in this together. And decarbonization is the vision.
We have a huge network between the two of us. And so if you're interested in learning more, please reach out. If you have any questions, please reach out. And if you have your own story, please reach out. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, take care of your communities, drink some water. I don't know.
Call your mom.
Kiss your dog.
Yes. Hug your friends, kiss their faces, appreciate every little bit of this life because that is what it's all about.
This is the only life you got, babes. Keep cultivating those reciprocal relationships around you. And thanks for caring. Reciprocity Lab is a sustainability collective that aims to connect one another through education, shared storytelling, and community outreach. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on social media. The links are in our bio. Today's episode was co-created by Cassie Fetchick and Maya Morrissey, with editing done by Maya Morrissey. Artwork for that podcast is done by Zoe Coyle. Until next time, thanks for caring.